Hey, brother, thank you for reaching out with your message to me this morning and for sharing the interactions you were having with your wife and your own frustration and bewilderment over that exchange. You share with me a lot of kind of scenarios, and there's quite a lot of story that you share with me. And to unpack really all of the points I would love to unpack with you in that short story you shared would take actually kind of a long video and would be really something better to share over time because we're early in a mentoring relationship and there's quite a lot to understand that is at play here. And rather than trying to address it on one video, I want you just to trust me in the process that we're going to cover kind of the building blocks of how did you get to this point, what's going on, and what would make things better. And so I really just want to focus on one particular part of your message to me, and it is one of the things that your wife said to you and that I'd like you to learn to understand and to think a little bit differently about. And that thing she said is that you're moving from one extreme to another and it's scary. Now, I'm really intrigued by this for a couple reasons. For one, she's telling you exactly what her emotional experience of you is. So to your wife, you look like a man who's moving from one extreme to another. And notice that she tells you what emotion this evokes in her, and that's fear. And so when we show up as men in an unreliable way, it invites our partner into a place of insecurity and fear. Now, I need to kind of preface this by saying we believe that all adult humans are ultimately responsible for their own emotions. Having said that, though, it's important to understand what invites a partner to be insecure and what creates a stronger feeling of security. Now, you're not responsible for your partner's emotions, but you are responsible for living as the best you. And I can tell you from experience, when a man lives as the best version of himself, it does promote a sense of security for the woman in his life. Notice I didn't say it doesn't create security because, again, our insides are what create our emotional sense of well-being. And that's true for men and for women. So even when a woman is feeling insecure, she's feeling insecure because of the meaning she's making out of what's going on. And yet, even though that's the case, and that's the case for you and I, meaning we also are experiencing emotions completely tied to the meaning we're making out of everyday moments. And so you own your emotions, your wife owns hers, but we still have a neat opportunity in a relationship in that when we live our best as men, we're giving our partner a great context in which to live out their best life, right? But also being very careful to point out that you're not responsible for creating other people's emotional well-being. That is to be codependent, and it's a dead end. And so you can't own another person's emotions, but you can own yours. And you can own your actions. You can own your own extreme shiftiness. And so what I would recommend is that you learn to see feedback like this from your partner as a mirror, that it's telling you, hey, from my perspective, you look like you're all over the place. You're moving from one extreme to another, and this scares me. It's a scary experience for me. Okay, so having said all that stuff I did about whose role it is to manage whose emotions and whatnot, I just want you to understand that if your wife were a mirror, she's saying, you look scary. You look scary because you're moving all over the place. And I think most females would say the exact same thing in the exact same circumstances because there's a desire, like an innate desire that women have for a sense of security, for a sense of being okay. They want to find in the male they're in a relationship with a consistent waypoint, right? And so the best metaphor, and I might have shared this with you before, that we use for this is to see you as a lighthouse. You know, if you go down to the Outer Banks or the beaches of North Carolina and all up and down the coast, you'll see these lighthouses, right? And a lighthouse serves a lot of purpose. It says, look, here's the coast. This is a navigation waypoint, and in maritime use, then people can use that. A captain of a vessel can say, oh, okay, there's the Hatteras Lighthouse, and they know where they are, so they can use it for navigation. But they can also use it to kind of find their bearings in rough seas, right? And so in a lot of ways, when a man is consistent, like a lighthouse, where he has the signal light is kind of always there spinning, it's the same cadence, and it's consistent, then a woman can kind of find her bearings in what feels like rough seas. Now, in this metaphor, I want you to think of the ocean as the feminine, right? The ocean has high tide, low tide. It has still days. It has kind of angry days. It has tumultuous, rolling, roaring waves, and it has calm and serene days. And this is very similar to how a lot of women feel day to day. None of those are bad. None of those emotions are bad. It's just that women have quite an emotional range. And so when a woman has an emotional range that is, moves a lot, and it goes through all of these different flavors of emotional range, and when we actually shift with that, then it's almost like if you moved Cape Hatteras Lighthouse around all the time, it would be completely useless as a navigational aid. A sailor could not look at that and really make functional use of it. They might be able to say, okay, well, there's land over there, but I don't know where I'm at. And so that sailor would feel perhaps lost, right? And so when a woman and a man are in a relationship, and the woman's emotions freak the man out, and he goes into a mode where he says, oh no, I'm afraid that she's going to think this or do this. And so he reacts to her emotion or her anticipated emotion. Then he starts moving around. He becomes shifty. He goes from one extreme to another. And what your wife is saying is that that's how you feel to her. You feel like a guy who's all over the place. And in your text to me, it's evident that you are. And I asked you that follow-up question, like how much of your actions over the last 24 hours were born out of a value system, and how many were born out of an attempt to not upset your wife. When we live in the latter, when we live in a sense of what's not going to upset our significant other or our wife, we're all over the place. We're going to move from one extreme to the other. And that's because we're not living as an open-hearted man who's living from a value system or from clarity about who he is, and he's not living authentically. He's living pragmatically, which means you're just going to do whatever justifies the means that you're trying to accomplish, which is keeping the woman from being angry. And there's a couple problems with that. First of all, the one problem is it assumes that a woman's anger is somehow this like really horrible, terrible thing. And most men in their immaturity believe this for a season. They believe that an angry or an irritable woman is a dysfunctional bad thing. And it's simply not. It's not. And in fact, when we treat a woman who's experiencing emotion like she's dysfunctional, we're actually judging her. We're creating disconnection. We're creating distance because we're judging that the way she's being right now shouldn't be. It should be something different. And nobody likes to feel like another person thinks that they're supposed to be something that they're not. And because we're essentially being critical of a woman's emotional state, it feels like critique of the person to her. And so she's going to feel all this as hurtful. Now, that's the first reason you don't want to connect yourself to her emotional state. The second reason is because, or the second way this hurts us is that it makes you not live according to a value system. You just live by whatever is going to avoid that emotional state. And so instead of living from things like integrity and values and virtues and a clear, distinct understanding of who you are and your purpose and your goals and what's important to you, you set all that aside. and you just live in whatever is expedient. And so when a man lives based on expediency versus what is his value system, he doesn't have integrity. And integrity is important to a woman. Integrity and trustability are how she knows that she's with a man who is strong. It's how she knows that she's with a man who is going to be consistent and reliable in ways that matter. And so I know this doesn't really make sense to a lot of men, but when you say, I'm going to the grocery store and I'm going to get these 10 things, and you go to the grocery store, you come home with 8 things, and you say, I just didn't feel like getting 2 of them. I wanted to save 20 bucks. To a woman, this is a big deal. Now, the reason that's a bigger deal than it is to you or I is because you changed what you said. And so you've said other things to her in her life. Things like, I do. Things like, I love you. Things like, I cherish you. And if you go and change your mind about something at the grocery store and you come home with 8 things instead of 10, what her feminine mind says is, where else does he do that? Is he inconsistent and unreliable to his words when he's on a business trip, when no one's around, right? Can I trust him that when he says these other things, that it's not shifty, that it's reliable, and that it's not moving from one extreme to the other? Because the reality is, an immature man says the same kind of stuff to a woman. He says in an emotional way, what is going to make this woman have an emotional high? Oh, I'm going to say that, right? And so a man will make grandiose promises. Oh, baby, I love you so much. I'm taking you to Europe next year, right? And then in a moment maybe where something doesn't feel is very doable, he says, oh, yeah, about that Europe thing. Yeah, I changed my mind. We can't do that. We can't afford it, right? That's just another example of how a man feels his own emotions that are tied to what's going to have an emotional reaction with her, and he says or does things based on what is going to have an emotional ROI, right? A positive emotional ROI. Men are always walking around, immature men, with this risk versus reward. Is it going to be worth it, right? And so when you live that way with her and you're kind of shifty, she cannot trust you. And when a woman can't trust you, she can't feel safe with you. If she can't feel safe with you, she can't feel connected to you. And when she can't feel connected to you, she does not want to be intimate with you. And instead, she's super irritated that you haven't panned out to be the trustable, reliable man that she's wanted. Now, I know what trolls watching this video are thinking. They're thinking about all the ways that she is deserving of critique. Now, the reason I'm not critiquing how your wife needs to change and all the ways the feminine is puzzling and complex is because none of that matters. Meaning, no matter what your wife needs to change in her life, no matter what ways women are mind-boggling, I still have to be the best me. And so instead of focusing on what my partner needs to change or what women should do differently, that is a complete waste of time. Every ounce of energy I give to what other people need to do differently is just deflection. It's just redirecting the focus off of who I need to be. Now, whether I'm in a relationship or not, it pays huge dividends to be a trustable, reliable guy. To be a man that has the integrity of a lighthouse pays a man dividends everywhere, including relationships. And so it's in his career, it's in his friendships, it's in his mission and his purpose. Integrity is really essential for a man, and a man that lives with deep integrity is a man that lives with a deep sense of fulfillment and a deep sense of satisfaction, because they are satisfying ways to live. And so we're not men that are going to have integrity for the sake of pleasing a woman. We're having integrity because integrity is worth having, right? And so it can be really easy to get frustrated with the mirrors that are women telling us, hey, here's all the ways you're out of your integrity. Here's all the ways you're inconsistent and unreliable. But if you start to learn to see these as helpful, just as helpful as a mirror that shows you, man, you got a big grease mark on the side of your face. but, then we can start to really prosper by using that feedback to become our best selves. And so your wife's message to you, I want you to see that way. It's a way of saying, you know what? You could have more integrity. You could have more consistency. You could have more reliability. Now, I happen to know in your story that you're in sales. I promise you that you will see a major increase in your sales itself if you just grow in consistency, reliability, and follow through, doing the same things consistently. Because how we do one thing is generally how we do everything, right? And so when we fearfully kind of work to avoid a certain emotion with a woman, experience tells me that a man will also be doing that to a degree in his career, right? He'll work not to upset a client. He'll work to have a certain emotional equilibrium or safe feeling. And he'll sacrifice his integrity to do that. And so a man with lower integrity might, at times have higher dollars, but I would tell you, as a guy that's watched men for, decades, that the men who have the highest amount of integrity ultimately win in careers. They're the best people in sales. They're the most trusted. They have very little work to do to get new clients and leads, because everybody recognizes that's a trustable, reliable person. And so pay attention to what your wife is telling you, right? This is good feedback. It hurts, it stings. Nobody likes to look in a mirror and see that they've got work to do. But if you will cooperate with this process and grow by it, you'll take your relationship and yourself to new levels. Now, we've got a lot more to talk about in your relationship with your wife and your mentoring journey. And so this is just a start. And I hope that you will hear what I had to say, that you'll take it to heart, that it'll make sense to you. And I just invite you to go ahead and, we've talked about, come into the community, keep dialoguing about these things. There's a lot of men there who are going to give you a lot of feedback, perspective, and challenge. And I promise you that if you focus on improving you, mark my words, I'll bet you a beautiful ribeye dinner in your hometown, that if you do that, your relationship will improve. You will see your wife flourish and open up in ways that you've never seen before. You will love your marriage, you will love your relationship, and it will go to new places. I promise you that. Like I said, and I truly mean it. I'll come to your town, and I'll take you out for a steak dinner if I'm wrong. All right. If you're not the guy I made this video for, and you're watching this, I want you to give some deep consideration to these words I've said. They might really piss you off if you're like about half the men that are going to watch this video, and they would have made me just as mad at one point. But it was when I finally kind of had the humility to recognize that maybe I wasn't as great as everybody had told me I was, and I considered for a moment, maybe I have some work to do in my life. That's when my relationship with my wife changed. I was on the verge of calling it quits. That was 20 years into that marriage. I'm almost at 30 now. I love my wife more now than I ever have. We have the best relationship. And it all started with conversations with me on the other side of this camera, talking to men telling me similar things. And so if you're struggling in your marriage relationship and you're wondering, man, is there any hope for this thing to turn around? This is just one small piece in how to make that turnaround. But I invite you to reach out. Let's talk about what's going on in your relationship. I'd like to hear more of your story, and you can do that by scrolling down into the description. You'll see a link where you can set up a call with me, and we can start to have that conversation really soon. And so with that, I wish you a good day, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.